This is a presentation on risk matrix. The risk matrix is a tool that helps us identify and prioritize all the project risks. Basically contains 4 elements: a description, a probability of the risk, the impact levels, and an index. We'll go into each one of those in more detail. Here's an example of the risk matrix. Basically is a simple table where we identify and list the different risks. Then we assign a level of probability, a level of impact. We then calculate the risk index and we identify a response to that. For each one of the risks that we have identified by the project team, we then develop the different levels and data that helps us then manage our risk. The description of the risks is a description of a situation with the possibility, again this is the important word because we need to describe it as a probability, of a potential harm to the project. Mostly the harm needs to be quantified in terms of schedule, if there's going to be delays to the project, budget is going to cost us more, or quality, if there are going to be problems in the deliverables of the project. I need to stress the need to describe the risk always as a possibility, because we're dealing with probability, something that may or may not happen. When we describe something like we don't have it, or we're not going to get it, or we don't have access to, we are already describing a situation as a fact. Then we manage that as an issue and not as a risk. So when we describe risk, we're always dealing with probabilities, something that may or may not happen in the future. The level of probability is a value that describes the probability of the risk. Something very simple, usually using a simple scale of low, medium, and high, where the people on the team, when they are describing the risk, assign a probability based on their experience or based on historical information, and they assign a level of probability. The same thing with impact, a value that describes the impact of the project if the risk occurs. So what will happen to the project if we have that risk? We can also use the same levels to simplify our process where we have low, medium, and high impact. Then we have the risk index, which is a value from the multiplication of probability and impact values. The purpose of that is to help us define the priorities for the project. Then the response are the actions that the project team can take to respond to the risk based on the index level. Let's look at that in more detail. Here's a table where we identify our probabilities and our impact based on the levels. A level 9 will be where we have high impact and high probability, and a level 1 will be when we have low impact and low probability. And you can see in between that we have different layers of numbers that, based on those indexes, help us then identify the kind of strategies and action we need to make. The level and the response strategy, these are the most common ones. When you have a high level, the risk level on the project, this is the index level, then the idea will be, and the recommendation will be, to avoid it, meaning taking immediate actions. Levels 4 to 6, sometimes the actions will be to mitigate. You prioritize the action based on the resources and the availability of people to manage that. Then a level 2 to 3, you transfer that, you plan the action. Maybe it's the project that doesn't have the skills, and then you find another organization who can do that, and that's the process of transfer. And when you have a very low level, most of the time the best action is to accept the risk, because if it happens, the impact of the project will be very small. This is the view of our risk matrix. When it's completed, we have identified all our risk. We have assigned a probability between medium, low, or high to the different risks. The team also identified the risk impact, low, high, higher, and medium. Then we calculate the risk index, and we have all those values, and based on those values then we can choose the different strategies or responses that we can use for that. They are not always those. There may be a mix between, depending on the type of project and the type of risk, and The last one is also an important element that we add to the matrix is the risk owner, the person responsible to carry on that response. Here is another view where now we have organized our index based on their impact and probability. So a high value in our index, then we know that this is a risk that we need to take an immediate action, and there is a person responsible to that. So that means we need to assign a time, a schedule, and sometimes even a budget, so we can take some of those activities to reduce the impact of the risk to the project. Depending on the resources and the time, then you can go to the next level, where you can then work on those risks, where you can probably mitigate some of those events or transfer. And the last ones, when you have a very low level of index, usually you can accept the risk. An example would be that if the risk happens, the delay could be 2 days, so there is no big problem for a project that is a year long to have a delay 2 days, because somehow you can catch up and recover those days. So our risk matrix is a simple tool that helps us organize the risks based on the levels of probability, based on impact, and help us prioritize so we can take a more focused attention to those risks that will have a high impact to the project. The idea is that this risk matrix needs to be evaluated on a regular basis. Our project needs to come back and look at the data that they were able to collect and see if there are new risks that are coming along, because it's very common that as more information is available to the team, they will be able to define new risks. So whatever that happens, that the best practice is to come back and add those risks and create a new level of greater index and have a response plan. And sometimes risks might go away, a risk that we identify early for whatever reasons or changes that happen, the risk then disappears, and we take the actions and make sure that we don't spend more time and effort working on that area. Thank you for your attention.